Welcome to the 2020 Buckeye Book Fair. Thank you for joining us for this series of virtual events with Ohio authors and illustrators. The Buckeye Book Fair provides an annual celebration of literacy through author visits, educational programs for K through 12 students, and events for people of all ages. All of the books featured today and throughout the entire Buckeye Book Fair are available for purchase at buckeyebookfair.org. Should you have any questions for the presenters, please click on the Q&A button and type them in the window that appears, and they'll be answered later in the session. Lindsay Ward was born and raised in sunny California, but now lives with her family in Peninsula, Ohio. Her book, Rosie Stronger Than Steel, is a story of Rosie the tractor, built by women in the US and sent to England to dig and plough alongside female farmers during World War II in support of the war effort. Frank Tupter grew up in a haunted house in Cleveland. His favourite holiday is Halloween, and How to Build a Haunted House is his debut picture book. It's a spooky rhyming romp where creatures of all types work together to build a haunted house for a vampire family in need of a home. Stephen Harpster is a Cincinnati resident and wants to get kids into drawing, creating, and imagining. In his book, Draw Alpha Beasts, kids can learn to draw more than 130 imaginary creatures using letters and numbers as a starting point. Jason Tharp is an author and illustrator living in Columbus. It's Okay to Be a Unicorn is the story of Cornelius J. Sparklesteed, who is known among all the other horses in Hoofington for his beautiful and creative handmade hats. But Cornelius is hiding a secret under his own tall, pointy hat.
And now, here's our moderator, Lindsay Ward, with our first question for our panelists. Lindsay?
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today, and thanks for everyone for joining us today to talk about some books, some picture books with some authors and illustrators. I'm really excited to be moderating. I've actually never done this before. And I'm an author illustrator myself. And so I'm going to ask some questions to each of the panelists today, and we're going to dive in a little bit into their work and just get started. So I'm going to start with you, Steve. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your work and your newest book.
Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. Nothing worse than talking and no one can hear anything. Hey, so I have tried to make drawing as simple and fun as I possibly can. I know a lot of kids love to draw, but sometimes get frustrated with creating characters. So I take letters and turn them into cartoon characters. For instance, this turtle is drawn with a lowercase letter H. And so if you, with the book Draw Alpha Babies, you will take letters and turn them into various characters.
I think that's so great. I went to your site, and what started as Harptoons, right? And now
Yes.
it's changing to.
Yeah, now it's Drawing with Steve Harpster.
Okay.
Every time I do a school visit, everyone calls me Steve Harpster. It's never Mr. Harpster or Steve. It's just Steve Harpster. So that's what they know me as. So why fight it? Just go with it, right?
No, that's great. I mean, I was looking into what you had done, and I love that you use numbers and letters to, like you were saying, the lowercase h. And like when I look at the turtle, I see an uppercase D too,
Yeah.
You have these, really practical applications of numbers and letters that kids are learning. And I certainly can relate to that as I have children in that age group. And so taking that kind of skill set and then applying it to drawing is so fascinating. Where did that idea come from?
So, well, I can show you real quick here. When I was a kid, a teacher showed me how to turn a number 5 into a lion, and it was real simple. So they just took a 5, and this is my first grade teacher, and she drew a little dot here, and then she drew a nose there, and an ear, and some teeth, and then a mane. And that just always stuck with me. So a lot of times being an illustrator, we get asked to teach people how to draw things. But, it can be tough. It can be frustrating for kids. And this was just a simple way. So I started taking this idea and coming up with my own characters and trying to make drawing really simple. I always thought it'd be cool if kids could draw with me instead of me just drawing for them, if they could actually participate. And I found out later on that this was actually done by Sid Hoff, who is illustrated Danny and the Dinosaur and Sammy the Seal. And but it took me a long time to figure that out. I just thought my first grade teacher was incredible. I just thought that was amazing that she knew how to do that. So, but many years later, I found out who actually created this character.
Well, that's awesome. So as far as what's been going on right now, because of course teaching kids how to draw, like I myself was posting videos on Instagram for showing kids how to do things. And I think that was something that a lot of illustrators were finding a way to, connect with readers, especially because we weren't able to go into schools and talk to kids in person with, library visits or bookstore visits. And I guess, you're already doing this whole thing. Do you feel like the pandemic changed anything for you, or was this kind of like hit the ground running because you were already kind of featuring this as a big part of what you do?
Well, it was strange. So my wife came up with this wonderful idea of like go on Facebook Live and do Facebook drawing events. And so I was doing it more for myself. Like I was just depressed. I'd lost all my school visits and I thought, well, it'll be something to do. Mm-hmm. And so I advertised it and I started getting texts and phone calls from all over the country and people around the world because I didn't put the time zone when this was going to take place. I didn't think about it. I thought 4 people were going to show up and I had like 1,300 show up on the first week, different days drawing with me. I had so many people drawing. I did not expect that at all. And so I started building this new fan base where, before I was going to schools and I was talking to a few hundred kids, and now I was talking to kids all over the world and got to meet so many different people. And then from the Facebook Lives, I started doing some Zoom summer camps. And some of those kids that were doing the Facebook Lives then were drawing with me on the summer camps, more personal, more one-on-one, the ones that really were into art. And so it really evolved. It was really strange and surprising, I got to say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's really a cool way to kind of reconnect with everyone, especially given the challenges we're all dealing with right now with all of that. So what does a typical day for you look like now when you're do you have scheduled drawings that you're doing throughout the day? Or is it one time a day, or how do you kind of do that?
So as summer went on, the Facebook Live started to kind of, people are getting more back to normal. People were kind of establishing their own schedule. So the Facebook Lives did drop down in attendance. So now what I do is I do, 2 or 3 a month, and I advertise when they will be. But then I've also been filling up my time with school visits and library visits where I teach people how to draw. Or they draw with me, events like this. And so the Facebook Live, which I was doing every day during the start of the shutdown, I did that all the way until the end, about the beginning of June. And then I started tapering it back because summer was, the kids were having more stuff that they could go outside and do. Things were getting a little more back to normal. And it was really, it was in the middle of the day and it was like, my kids are at home too. So, it was like, hey, everyone's got to get quiet. You got to free up some internet space so I can, don't have to buffer and things like that. So yeah, it was about more getting back to normal. So now I do the events, but they're more scheduled than every day.
And then you do drawing books too, right?
Yes,
that you have print and digital, is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And so how are you putting those out yourself? Like, do you do those often? Because I would imagine you're creating a collection, quite a big collection of work from doing all these drawings. Do you just kind of create a compilation of that, or do you, honey?
So the published books, so I self-publish actually because I can get them out so quickly. So I do a lot of self-publishing, and then these books are then compiled. A publisher bought the books. It was kind of a nice deal because I could still self-publish and sell my books, and then they were also selling my books in the stores. So that was kind of nice to be able to have that. So it was definitely rewarding to go from a published author to a self-published author back to a published author. So it's been a whirlwind. I'll say that.
I can say I can relate to what you're saying in that it's very freeing to be able to self-publish at your own pace. I myself had released some drawing books this summer, and it was so nice to just do it, to not like, you know, weigh in with a million other people and the back and forth, like just, you know, write it and draw it and put it together and just get it out there. So I can totally.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with the self-publishing, you're doing a lot of the same things anyways, because the publishers do not promote you that much.
Right.
They can get you in more stores, of course, like the retail is good, but as an artist, we're kind of selling ourselves anyways. I mean, we're creating work to promote ourselves,
Right.
whether you're promoting yourself to a publisher or to a general audience. That's what our work should be doing. So I just found selling myself was kind of natural. So why not just do the books myself too? So
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
So what is your favorite thing to draw?
Monsters.
Would you like to draw one with the viewers right
Yeah,
now?
we can do a monster, sure. So let's see. Let's see, we can do a monster. We can just like, this one's a really simple one that I draw with the kids because, you know, I think an S is a perfect like line. It's so fun what you can do with the letter S. We can draw the monster's eyes here and nose. And the great thing about monsters, you can never be wrong. A monster can look like anything. There's no right or wrong to monsters. And then for the feet, we're just going to draw a capital letter B on its side and some toes, and then connect the end of the S to the front foot and to the back foot. You can add a tail, you can add spikes, you can add bad breath, whatever you want. It really is whatever you want to do with monsters. That's what's so freeing about them. I think that's the great thing, is all imagination when it comes to creatures like this.
Well, that's awesome. I think it's great how applicable your style is, and how you know, kids can really embrace it because you break it down. It's very simple to follow, and then of course the encouragement that they can do it too, which I think is awesome.
Right. And the other thing I always say is I don't teach you how to draw perfect. I teach you how to have fun. So there's no perfect, right? Like,
Yeah.
mistakes here, but I mean, there's things here that are not perfect. There's the mistakes, but you got to let those things go. And I think that's the hard thing kids have. They want to make everything perfect, and there is no perfect, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important thing. I hear that a lot when I go into school visits, and teachers are like, "Oh, I love that you told them you rewrote it 15 times or
Yeah.
more," because they want to sit down and get it right the first time, and that never happens. So
Right.
thank you for drawing with us. With that, I'm gonna segue into Jason, because I know you also do this kind of draw along as well, right? With kids that are tuning in with you. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do?
Yeah, so I write and illustrate books, and Wonder Friends, kind of the same as Steve, started out as I just hit Facebook. I was the same deal. I lost, I think, when it shut down. It was, I don't remember how many school visits it was, and I was like, well, I already have Facebook. Might as well just hit Facebook Live and see what happens. And pretty much exactly what Steve was talking about is exactly what, you know, happened with that. And then I just decided to utilize to help publishers, because I still publish with publishers. I don't do self-publishing yet. And to kind of help promote, I decided, well, let's just do a YouTube show. And I took everything that I learned from Facebook Live and what I felt like I liked about it, and what I was hearing feedback from kids, and kind of just smashed it together into. So you kind of learn. It was kind of cool in a way. You get to learn how to produce a show, right? Kind of forced, like, you know, oh, hey, your whole business is gone, so now let's figure out some new way to do something. And you know, and then as far as books go, you know, I grew up in a really small town in Ohio, and telling people that I wanted to write stories when traditionally it was all farmers and carpenters and, you know, factory workers. It was kind of like I was the weird kid. And so I tend to write books that are for those weird kids, the kids that feel like they're a little bit different or on the fringe, which I think that's pretty much every kid. So I write that, and, you know, use characters that are different and weird and funny that kind of relate, you know, add a little bit of levity to something kind of heavy. So
That's awesome. I think, you know, giving kids that exposure is really great. I know from my own experience, when I go into school visits, I forget sometimes, because I grew up in a big city, that not every kid has exposure to endless possibilities of what you can be. And like you're saying, if you're from a smaller town and the list of kind of what you see in front of you of what the jobs that grownups are doing, if that's very narrow, and you maybe are interested in something else, that can feel very intimidating. And I think, like you're saying, to go in and talk to kids and show them that there's a whole world out there that they can participate in or be when they grow up, is huge. And I definitely got that when I was lucky enough. I actually got a copy of your book sent to me, so I could read it beforehand. And it's just such a great message, that it's okay to be yourself. And that I loved that your main character, who I'm blanking on his name right now.
Cornelius J. Sparklesteed.
Thank you. I love that he's so afraid to show that he is a unicorn, and kind of you build up to the fact that by the time he does reveal who he is, it's okay because his friends love him and it doesn't really matter. And so I thought that was a really great message. So it's such a fun book, and this is digital, right? The art for this?
Yeah, I do. I do sketches, like really, really rough sketches, and I use a Cintiq to do all of my work. Usually combo between Illustrator and Photoshop.
So is everything done digitally from sketch to finish?
No, I do actual sketches, like just blue line sketches, but they're like extremely rough. I tend to I don't know. I just got really comfortable. Like Steve's great with paper and markers. I wish I could be that good with paper and markers. Like whenever I pick them up, I'm just like, oh. So I end up always going back to Cintiq just because I've been using it for so long. I know which way it's going to go. So it's just really comfortable. So I tend to just make blocks. So like with Cornelius, he was a hot dog on all my panels. Okay. Like the sketches, I was like, they're like, send sketches. Like, no, you don't want to see the sketches because you aren't going to understand. And they wanted to see, and they're like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, so yeah, just roll with it. So I tend to block things.
So when you're working, because you're writing obviously too, can you tell us a little bit about your process? Where do your ideas come from? And do you start with the words first and then go to the art, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so like I can use Cornelius as an example. Like you could see in the background, see this skunk guy. He's the next book that's coming out. So I came up with, like, Cornelius was really kind of based off of me. Okay, so like it started out with this idea of, 5 years ago, I had wanted to write books. Like that was my big goal since I was 6 years old. But I had teachers all growing up that told me that I was a horrible writer. And in fact, my 8th grade guidance counselor told me that I wouldn't amount to anything because all I did was draw all over my stuff, right? So
well, who's laughing now?
Right. And so, but when you grow up that way and when you become, an adult and you have all those things, you kind of are afraid to tell everybody, hey, this is what I want to do. I was working at, Bath and Body Works in the design department. I was doing well there. I worked at Justice and I drew a bazillion monkeys and unicorns and all that stuff like there. And I did well there, but it was just like, I felt like the life was getting sucked out of me. And I went into licensing for a long time. And then I went in from licensing and I started brand building and selling brands. But still, I just wanted to tell stories and write stories. So having all of that background, I kind of brought it into what kind of character could I use that would have all these flaws, but live in the real world. And it started out as a unicorn. The first draft of the book was actually Unicorn for Hire. And he was trying to get all these different jobs, but he couldn't get them. Like he wanted to be a balloon catcher, but he kept popping them, like all these different things, right? Based off of all the things that he saw as negatives to himself. So that's where that came from. And then with the skunk guy, it was like, this book is, based off of like talking to kids. Kids, I talk to, I don't know how many school visits and kids, and usually the kids stay after the talk to me are the ones that are struggling the most. So it's kind of cool to talk to them and hear what they say. And a lot of questions that I always get is like, what if I like something different than everybody else? They make fun of me. Like, what do you do then? So that's kind of what, his name is Panda Cat. And he likes smell good stuff, but he lives in a really stinky world. So
is he a skunk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he lives in Smellville.
That's great.
Yeah, it comes out. I think that one comes out in February, I believe. Yeah.
Of 2021.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's awesome. I mean, I think those are so relatable, and I can completely relate to what you're saying about the school visits. Like, it is always the kids that, they're real quiet usually, but they're brave enough to stay after, and you know how much courage that has to take. And
Right.
it's, if you can spend a few minutes with them and be able to connect with them, it makes all the difference sometimes, and I just think that's so important. Do you feel like the shutdown and the pandemic has affected your work? I mean, obviously it changed with school visits, but do you feel like it just kind of shifted your focus on and kind of reinvented how you were doing things, or?
I think that I'm busier now. I'm having a hard time, because out of this came other books, and I'm working on multiple books now, and it's kind of like the shift has happened a little bit where school visits are really the only thing that dropped off for me. Yeah, yes and no. I do severely miss like the interaction of being in front of a bunch of kids and getting them to scream and act crazy and draw, and all this stuff like that. Like, I do miss that a lot. So you do kind of get to the point where you feel like a little bit of a hermit. Like, you're just like, okay, hey, all right, studio, it's just me. And I want to do like the stadiums and do some cutouts just to feel like I have other people in here with me sometimes. But
that would be great.
So other than getting boring sometimes, yeah, like you just kind of get a little stir crazy, I think. But it hasn't affected me in a huge way. I think this year, it'll be interesting to see with the new book in February. That's where I feel like I'll probably, because when Cornelius came out, I was book tour. Literally, got back from North Carolina and it shut down. So the day that the pandemic happened, it was picked up at Target. Literally the day it shut down, Target was putting in their stores, Barnes and Noble as well. So like, it was just like, rug just yanked. And you're like, okay, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with the new book, because I haven't been fortunate enough to not have to launch a book during this thing. I just, like everybody else, I'm sure that we all thought this would be over by now. So
yeah, it's a strange thing. I had a book come out. I know my Frank had a book come out. Like, amidst all that, it's a weird time to have a book release because you can't really do anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can try to do readings and you can share art and try to, but it's very limited, and that's really difficult. I think we're all kind of just doing the best we can with that, and hopefully on the other side of this, we can get some more exposure for those books.
Yeah, the readings are best because you see the kids like just digging their nose like in the front, like you're just like, oh yeah, that's really
yeah, you're really hitting home with them. Yeah.
Like, all right, cool. I'm glad the book is good.
Yeah. It's definitely been an interesting challenge. I think, especially, it's funny that you said that you feel you're busier, because I've had some people tell me that they're just not working at all. Like they're just overwhelmed and they can't get through that creative block. And then I hear what you're saying, where people are they're super creative. They're getting all this work done. They're like, they can't even shut it off. It seems to be, there's no gray area. Most people I'm hearing are falling in one category or the other.
Yeah.
And so that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that you're busy and you're working and coming up with all sorts of new ideas. So as far as, because you have these messages about in your work, what is it that you hope readers gain from your work when they read, It's Okay to Be a Unicorn, or they're drawing along with you? What is it that you hope they get out of it?
Well, for me, like, huge passion is kindness, but not necessarily kindness is like be nice to other people. For me, it's all about self-compassion, self-kindness. I grew up, essentially hating myself because of what I thought of myself based off of what the outside world told me. Inside my house, I was taught dream big, possibilities, right? But when you leave that part, the world's really, the reality of the world is the world doesn't care. So for me, the mission is with kids, it's just to kind of show them that, like, to give them that voice, plant a seed that tells them that, like, the world isn't going to be fair to you. But when you start to learn how to accept that all the flaws, all the pains, all those things are actually what's normal in life, because I think so much, especially right now, we're teaching kids that through social media and stuff like that, your world has to be perfect. And the issue is that, like, you know, there's no such thing. So when you grow up thinking that it's got to be perfect whenever flaws happen, then as a kid that gets ingrained so young. And for me, that's what it was. It was like, you know, it took so long to kind of get over who I thought I was. You know, I was really good at wearing masks, right? Like I could fake all this and be the kind guy and all that stuff like that. But then as soon as I'm with myself, I'm telling myself, you know, the worst things that I would never say to anybody else. So my hope is with kids that I can kind of teach them a little bit of that type of thing. You know, the books in a lot of way for me is a lot of different therapy stuff too, to deal with. And then as far as the drawing with it, my goal, honestly, with Wonder Friends is I try to not draw at the top level that I can, because I want them to draw better than me. Kind of the same sort of way what Steve was talking about, like, you know, I try to break it down into simple things where, like, you know, ears can be D's and things like that, but really trying to just get them to the point where when they get done with it, it's close enough that they go, oh, like, holy cow. Or I've even had some kids, like, I've had some parents say, wow, it looks better than the guy drawing it. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm trying to go for, is to get them to, you know, because it's a confidence thing, because you never know the kid, you know, the kids are so hard on themselves where, you know, I've seen, you know, and I'm sure Steve and you and everybody that's done any sort of drawing in front of kids, if you draw something and it doesn't look, some kids will just, it's a meltdown.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's really what the goal with that is, just to kind of, you know, every kid doesn't have to grow up to be a doctor and lawyer. You know, everybody's got their different version of happy. And, you know, I think for me growing up, it's just like now that I get to do what I dreamed about when I was 6.
Yeah.
I need to take all those years of laying on layers of not being nice to myself and realize that the key to opening all that door was just actually saying, like, maybe all that stuff was normal, and like, this is how life is supposed to be, and just accept me for me and do what I want to do. And I don't know, when I started doing that, doors started just opening like effortlessly. So that's the goal.
I think you hit on a really important thing, which is that, you know, we see this we're inundated with this idea of kindness all the time and promoting kindness, which of course is important, but there is not the flip side of that, which is the self-awareness and self-kindness and self-care. That's a really big component of being able to actually be kind towards other people.
Sure.
And I do think that's something that needs to be addressed more and you know, just in not even necessarily in picture books, but just in general. Like, I'm a parent, I have 3 boys, and you know, I want them to be proud of themselves and kind to others, of course, too. Right. You know, so I think that's really great that you're promoting that message, and something that you know, unfortunately we're not hearing very much. So right. I hope that continues to get out there. And, you know, thank you for sharing your work with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Awesome.
Do you want to do a draw along or to share with?
I can, sure.
It's up to you. I don't want to put you on the spot.
So I'll draw a monster too, because that's my favorite thing to draw as well. So I'm just gonna hold up my, can you see this okay?
Yep.
So I like to just draw some weird shapes. That's kind of where mine started from. I had an elementary teacher as well teach me through scribbles, like, you know, draw a scribble, then turn it into something. So that's kind of what I do with a lot of the things that I do. So I kind of like call my stuff it's like some sort of weird scribble blob stuff, you know, and I think that's what's beautiful about monsters. You know, Steve nailed it. There's no wrong. You can't tell me that's not a monster. Like, I don't care what you say. You can't tell me it's not a monster. I can scribble all over this page and draw 2 eyeballs above it, and he's a scribble monster. So yeah, that's the beauty of that. But, you know, I think drawing, anybody can do it. I think that if you just give it a shot, try, you know, you never know what you could do. Amaze yourself. Remember what it was like to get kindergarten when you picked up a crayon, you didn't care. Do the same thing when you just want to doodle when you're on the phone and stuff like that. I think that's the cool part.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue actually, because Frank's book is all about monsters and how to build a haunted house. And obviously, so not only is this my first time moderating, this is my first time moderating and interviewing my own husband, which is a first. So I'm really excited about this book. I've seen it from the beginning because obviously Frank wrote it, and it's just very cool. So Frank, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book? And it's your debut picture book, and kind of where the idea came from for it.
Where the idea came from. Okay, so How to Build a Haunted House by me and Kyle Beckett. The idea, strange as it is, the guy said in the beginning that I grew up in a haunted house. He wasn't lying completely. When I was a kid, my dad, he always wanted to restore an old house. So we bought an old house, and in that old house, there were no walls, there were no stairs, but maybe there was something living in that basement. We did the restoration on it. The house was 1835. It was a Greek revival, and it took 10 years to restore it. It had been a few different things, not just a house. Before we got it, it was a used car lot, but before that, it was a mortuary. And so the basement was pretty scary for a 4-year-old. Not gonna lie, different rooms cut off on their own. Dirt floor. There was a hole in the floor. So you'd nudge my little brother. I'd nudge him down the steps and just push the door closed on him, so it like really get him scared. But I had older brothers, so they would do that to me. So it would be, it was a frightening experience. There was definitely something weird in that house. Now, does mental health have something to do with that? Maybe it does. Maybe it's because you're 5 years old. Maybe it does too. I don't know. But there's some weird things that happen in that place. So I always loved movie monsters. I watched Friday the 13th last night. Did anyone else? No?
I guess
No
kind of, because I watched part of it with you.
No?
So
Well,
that
it was
counts.
Friday the 13th yesterday, so Friday the 13th was on TV last night. So I always loved movie monsters. My dad was big on the old time stuff. Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy, I remember as a kid watching, I think it was Night of the Creeps. One of those had a mummy in it, and obviously Frankenstein. But I just thought of this idea one day about that house, how we had to restore that house, and who would want to live in that house? Now that house is beautiful. Now somebody else bought it and did a really good job on it. But yeah, when you're little and you have a wild imagination, I guess, that I didn't know that I had, that house was definitely haunted, to me at least. So that's where the idea came from.
So can you tell us a little bit about your writing process, since you aren't an illustrator, you're an author, and what is that like? Do you find that you're visualizing a lot while you're writing, even though you're not going to be handling that portion of the book? How does that factor into you or for you when you're writing?
Another part of how this thing started was I saw an excavator. And when I saw that excavator, if you look at how the excavator arm works, it looks like a human arm. It scoops, it lifts, it looks like from the elbow. So the idea was then, can you make something out of this? Does it, put a skeleton crew together, and can they make something out of this elbow? That started that process. As far as writing process goes, I started writing adult first. I had 6 adult novels before I did any kid stuff, and then kind of stumbled into this idea. But visualization is a big part when you're writing. For me, adult novels and that kind of thing, there's a lot of movement, and this was kind of the same thing, just shorter and rhyming. Obviously, this is a rhyming story. So it's somebody said in the earlier presentation, it feels like putting together, I don't know if they said a game or a puzzle, but for me, it's putting together a puzzle. And figuring out how to put all of that stuff together, especially with rhyming, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and I look forward to that challenge. So there's a lot of I'm sure you guys use the thesaurus.com, and then Rhyme Zone is a great one. If you don't know that one, that's a really good one. But finding things to fit, it's its own game, and it's a game that I play every morning starting at 5, assuming my kids don't walk in and interrupt me and I have to put them back in bed. But that's pretty much the process.
I think it's really interesting, with rhyme, like you said, it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. And I think one of the hardest things about writing in rhyme is that not only are you worried about the rhyme and the pace and all of that, but you have to rhyme in a way that doesn't feel like you're forcing it, that the story is still first and foremost, and the rhyme serves the story, not the other way around. And I think that's so difficult to do. And there's just some really fantastic lines in this book. I know my favorite one, which to be honest, to this day, I'm shocked that they let you leave in the manuscript, which is that no one died in one of the stanzas. And that's the line. And it's so great. And, I think for you, because you do write in prose too, how do you decide when you're going to write in rhyme and when you're going to write in prose? Do you let the story kind of dictate that, or how do you approach that?
Nothing is planned. It's all just feel. I'll have a day when it just is there, which is difficult because if you have something else you're working on that's prose, it's hard to go back to it. The beginning of the story that I'll work on after is always in rhyming. I'm like, yeah, you can't rhyme a middle grade novel. It's just not, that ain't gonna happen, bro. So you start out and you're like, oh, why is this not rhyme? Well, it's because you kind of have to get away from it mentally. I don't know. It's almost like it's there. If it's not, it's not. And again, you're putting together that puzzle. You put together the puzzle. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know we were just talking the other day about how, the master of rhyme, you and I both agreed, is Julia Donaldson. And, you read
Yes.
Gruffalo or you read Broom on a Broom, and it's almost like you don't even notice that it's rhyming because the story's so good and it's so well done, and you just go right through it. It's just incredible. And chasing that is so difficult. As far as because you're writing and someone else is illustrating your work, can you talk a little bit about what that process is like? I know for me, watching you go through it was so interesting because being an illustrator, I've never experienced that, where you're giving your text to someone else to kind of take the reins with. What was that like for you, and how did that go with this book?
Well, Steve and Jason, you guys have you guys turned a manuscript over before? You have? Okay. I didn't know because you guys are both illustrators. So they paired me with somebody, obviously, and I had not a lot of input on who that was. I don't know. Did you guys have input on?
Oh, they're both muted. Hold on.
No.
It was me, so I didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you guys ever illustrated someone else's text?
Yeah, I was an illustrator before I started writing. Yeah.
Okay. But
So
have you guys ever and then have you ever written something and let someone else illustrate it? Okay, just curious. Okay.
I don't think I would.
I mean, you kind of just get paired. It's who they think you're going to fit the best with, and you have to go from there. They said, in the beginning, it was like, well, we'll give you some input. I had a little bit of input, but it was more so just, all right, here, we like this guy. He's got some great visuals. What do you think? Oh yeah, guess what? We're going with him regardless of what you say. So you just, you run with it. I would get, let's see, I probably did 8 to 10 edits on his work. Just, they'd send me something. What do you think? Go through it, put a note down. How do you think this should look? Where should it be going? Does it match with the text? These are our notes. Do you see anything that's different? I got some that went in. I got some that didn't. It was a pretty smooth process, but you have people in between that you can't like go and scream at the other person, what are you doing? This doesn't fit. I don't know. What do you know, you can't do that, but it's probably good to have a go-between. There's a middleman for a reason when you do that. I mean, not saying that. Steve, are you?
My comment is I always tell people, because people don't understand that, and I always say it's like having a realtor for a house. Like, it's better that you don't sell your own house. Yeah, because you're too attached.
Well, you can ask Lindsay about that, because we did a book together, and we're doing work together now. And being married and doing it, it's just like you're sleeping on the couch. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So you're it's your kid, and you got to let it go. But at the same time, it's like, all right, it's not my kid. It's just stuff. You know, it's words on a paper, and we got to figure it out. But yeah, it can get testy. You know, you have your opinion and how it should look, and the other person has theirs, and you got to meet in the middle. You know, which is not easy for everyone, but you get it done.
I think, you know, I was really impressed when you first got Kyle's art. You know, I knew he'd be a really good fit, because one of the things that intimidated me the most about your book was that it's all set at nighttime. And as an illustrator, I was like, oh my God, I would like that. That would terrify me. To deal with lighting like that was just like very intimidating to me. Because I just don't usually incorporate that much into my work. And then, you know, once we started seeing how he was putting it all together, and then adding in, I remember the spread we saw with the, was it the shrunken heads that he had added in here? Because this is not in the text, but he has these, the text just says, call in a favor, ring the chime. And he added in these great shrunken heads. And I think that's really, those kind of details are what makes a really good text and image marriage, you know, and really bring the book to life, where the illustrator's bringing secondary stuff that really bring the words to life. And I think it was really cool to see it all.
We both definitely watched Beetlejuice. Like we both, you know, like we both had that in our bag.
Yeah. And I think you needed somebody that looked, because you are a very visual person. And I don't think that's as common for author onlys. I think you see things like a movie. And it felt like Kyle really did that with the art for this, which was awesome. So I wanted to ask you one more question of each of you guys. And if there's anything else you guys want to share before we wrap up about your work or anything you have coming out. And then also if any of your website or your you know, the YouTube channels, if you want to enter that in the chat box, and then everyone has access to that, you're welcome to do that as well. Does anybody have anything else they want to share?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it was awesome.
Great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to be with this panel of authors and illustrators. And I wrote down Rhyme Zone. I got to check out that website.
Check out Rhyme Zone. It's great.
That's very cool.
Well, thank you guys so much. And thanks for everyone tuning in. It was nice to be with you guys today. And I hope you check out the rest of the events that the Buckeye Book Fair has throughout the weekend. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for participating in our picture book showcase today. And thank you to Lindsay for moderating the session as well. And thank you to our generous sponsors. Please visit our website at buckeyebookfair.org to see our other events and copies of the presenters' books.